I, yes, I am the composer for you. You cannot refuse. Do you remember this kind of music?
And I think I've heard it before, somewhere.
And you watched the movie?
I did watch the movie, actually, yeah.
All the three parts?
I think I've seen all three Godfathers, because that's what we're talking about, obviously.
So, who is the composer?
Nino Rota.
Nino Rota, but he had another name. You said Nino Giovanni di Capriccio, or what? No.
Giovanni Rota Rinaldi.
Rinaldi. Oh, this sounds much better than only Rota.
He didn't think so.
Giovanni Rinaldi, the famous composer from Sicilia. No, where have you been, Rota, from which?
Oh, he's a northerner. He's a Polentoni. He was born in Milan.
Ah, in Milan. Okay, so just besides the Verdi villa.
Yeah. And he went to school in Rome, Santa Cecilia.
Okay.
And then for 2 years in the 30s, he went to the Curtis Institute in the States.
If some of you maybe remember that we just talked about in our podcast about Miklós Rózsa, who was a Hungarian film composer, and I'm not allowed to say film composer, you always say a composer, who also did classical music, or let's say concert music, besides his film. Now, Nino Rota is his brother in Italy, or how can I see this?
Basically his brother in arms. They lived roughly around the same time. They were roughly equally successful with film music. Miklós Rózsa was much more focused on Hollywood because he lived there, and Nino Rota lived in Italy, so he did a lot of Italian films, and he only did a few American blockbusters, but most notably The Godfather Part 1 and 2. I'm not sure about Part 3, and for Part 2 he eventually finally got the Oscar, the Academy Award that people thought he had long deserved.
It's interesting to see. I mean, there is Hollywood, the big film industry, and then suddenly we have Italy also as a huge monumental film industry at the time. No? I mean, no one talking about Norwegian film or Swedish film, Austrian film, you know, it's Italy.
Yeah, and he worked in Italy, and he was best known for collaborating with the great Italian film directors of his time, Fellini, Visconti, Zeffirelli, although we think of Zeffirelli now as an opera director more than a filmmaker, but most famous he became as being the composer for the directors Fellini and Visconti.
Ah, okay.
So if you've seen Fellini or Visconti, you've heard Nino Rota. Il Gattopardo, 8½, La Strada, War and Peace, Roma, Satyricon.
Interesting is that the film studios, the Cinecittà in Roma, they were also used by for a lot of Hollywood productions, no? With the big, how you say, the Sandalen with the gladiators.
Well, Miklós Rózsa eventually went there for things like Ben-Hur and...
So eventually they could have met, and we don't know.
That's a good question, I don't know.
The reason why we do this podcast also is because we could record during the pandemic one of his opera. I mean, he wrote 10 operas. Yeah. And I mean, we could do one of his most famous one, Il Cappello di Paglia di Firenze, or how the English people would say the what?
The Florentine Straw Hat.
Thank you, the Florentine Straw Hat, yeah. And we have been there during the recordings, during the production at Opera Graz, and I could do a short promotional movie, which we can now watch a bit.
Che significa questo? Chi me l'ha chiesto? Chi me l'ha chiesto? This is a nice combination of bel canto and a movie.
Rota ist ein wirklicher Kenner der Musik. Also wenn man diesen Cappello di Paglia, diesen Florentinerhut anschaut, glaubt man fast ein bisschen italienische Operngeschichte, aber auch noch mit Ausflüge zu anderen Komponisten.
Stehlen würde ich nicht sagen. Es ist einfach seine musikalische Sprache. Es ist einfach ein Teil von der Kultur gewesen. Und diese Komposition wurde 1945, das war Ende vom Krieg. Und so ein lustiges Stück.
Ich dachte, meine Rolle ist es eine subrettenhafte Rolle, aber nicht, wie genau Sie sagen, das ist so eine wirklich lyrische Rolle mit vollem Herz, mit wunderschöner Linie. Natürlich, wir freuen uns alle wahnsinnig, dass wir jetzt aufnehmen. Aber natürlich, die Schwierigkeiten für uns liegen dort, dass wir müssen so viele Farben reinbringen, dass die Zuhörer am Endeffekt die ganze Facette, Palette von Gefühlen, von Emotionen, dass die wirklich das kapieren, was wir sagen wollten, was wir singen.
Wow, that's a fantastic Rossini opera, Donizetti opera.
It's a lot of fun. It's a wonderfully silly subject. Essentially, I would have subtitled the opera "The Hungry Horse."
Okay.
Because the trouble starts when a hungry horse just eats a straw hat of a gentleman's lover, and then of course the husband wants to see the hat, and then all kinds of mischief happens. And Nino Rota certainly borrowed from other composers, and very happily so, from himself also.
Yeah.
That's why he was later on often accused of plagiarism. But he figured, I mean, if I've got the music right here already, why not use it? So he took bits from himself and recycled them, sometimes concert music in film music, sometimes film music in concert music. And in this case, you can hear almost every composer that ever lived as an influence on Nino Rota, and Rossini perhaps the most in this opera. What's amazing about this music is it was composed in 1944, 45. Italy had just, or the part where he lived anyway, I think it was near Bari in the south, had just been liberated.
Yeah.
And the music sounds as if nothing had ever happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, it took a while, I think over 10 years, for him to finally orchestrate it, because there was no chance for a performance. And then eventually it became a minor hit in Italian opera houses and beyond, actually. It's had a few performances. Nino Rota conducted a performance himself that used to exist on LP. Has never made the jump to CD. And occasionally it gets revived. There's a DVD out there with a very young what's his name?
Diego Flores.
Juan Diego Flores. But this is the first CD recording available now.
Yeah, this is the first CD recording, as we say, from the Opera Graz, with a very young ensemble, with a very young lightning ensemble and soprano voices. But the music, Rózsa was really took care a lot of his concert music. He wanted to feel like a serious classical composer. Was it the same with Rota?
Probably to some degree, yes. I mean, Rota wrote about 160 film scores, but he also wrote more than 100 classical concert pieces. And apparently he had written an oratorio at the age of 8, and Toscanini encouraged him. So he was on the same path to becoming, a quote-unquote proper composer. And then success got the better of him, and he composed for film music. What doesn't come across from what I've read about him is that he was as keenly aware, or that he was trying to fight that perception quite as hard as Miklós Rózsa, who really wanted to be seen as a proper composer and did the film music sort of on the side, even though it eventually took over his life. And perhaps Nino Rota made his peace with that sort of double life.
You had in the booklet here a very nice statement. Rota himself speaks about his compositions.
That's towards the end of his life, where he said, "You see, if they say that my music is just about bringing in a bit of nostalgia and lots of good humor and optimism, well, I think that's exactly how I'd like to be remembered, with a bit of nostalgia, lots of optimism, and good humor."
Yeah, really sounds like Mr. Rota had a fantastic humor. But besides the opera, we also have a recording from the Westdeutsche Rundfunk Köln with the WDR Funkhausorchester Köln, and there also a harp concerto and a concerto for strings. And I really love the last movement from the concerto for strings. Yeah, I love this piece because it's totally different, Nino Rota, than we hear from the opera. It's more, how to say, experimental.
It's a little bit more experimental, I might not say, for a piece from 1964.
Yeah.
You know, Boulez was doing his magic at the time.
Yeah,
But I do find that there's a little bit more variety in the music of Nino Rota than, say, Miklós Rózsa. Miklós Rózsa was always very keen on making sure to separate the film music from the concert music, and in the end it all sounds the same anyway.
Yeah.
And Nino Rota was perfectly happy to borrow from himself, and yet manages to sound first a little bit easier on the ears generally, and a little bit more variety, I think, also in his music. Even.
Yeah, that's why I chose this piece, because it also shows another Nino Rota. It shows a bit more
sparkle.
Sparkling. Sparkling is Mineralwasser.
You know.
Okay, sparkling.
But maybe are you thinking that it shows a little bit more harmonic daring?
Yeah.
Again, daring probably not the right word.
Yeah.
But certainly a willingness to let other influences work on him gently.
Yeah. And I have also here one just a short of his amazing, beautiful harp concerto. Yeah, but it's always a bit, wie sagt man, verspielt auf Englisch?
Playful.
Playful, very playful music.
Decidedly playful.
Decidedly playful music, yeah.
And I just realized you also have a bit from Prova d'Orchestra, the Orchestra Rehearsal.
Yeah.
That wonderfully strange Fellini film where I think it's Carlos Kleiber.
Oh, you know the film? Yeah,
Yeah, you
okay.
don't?
No, okay.
The entire film is about the conductor rehearsing an orchestra,
Okay.
and all the things that can possibly go wrong, and some things that go wrong that couldn't normally possibly go
Oh,
wrong.
really? Okay.
And with the different characters in the orchestra.
Okay.
It's, if you're in the industry, if you love music, then that's actually a lot of fun. And I'd forgotten that Rota was also responsible for the music that they're playing, the conducting, the composers there. I think he might play himself actually in that film. Come to
Okay, so let's listen a bit to Prova d'Orchestra.
come to think of it, I think I would probably. I don't listen to Nino Rota, and whenever I hear the music, I think I should listen to Nino Rota. It's so much fun, and it covers a whole spectrum of music that we don't hear. It's not the dark romantic thing. It's 20th century Rossini, which is really, as he says himself, not the worst thing to be known for.
Would also work well for the concert halls, no? Honestly.
Oh, I mean, you wouldn't turn off people with that music,
No,
but they wouldn't come either. So that's
okay. Okay, if you would, I don't know, write a composer of the Godfather, Godfather and the music.
Then you get a different crowd, but you still fill the hall. Maybe that's a way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you get some taste now of another film composer, which I'm not allowed to say film composer, if a composer between the world of film and the concert music. So maybe you listen to some pieces of Nino Rota, very interesting. And we finish the podcast now with another film music composition of him from a Visconti film, Il Gattopardo, The Leopard.
Wow.
Did I very well? Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.